So today we are doing our last lesson in 5.5, 5.5D, which is on perpendicular lines. So today we are graphing and finding equations of lines that are perpendicular to each other. So first it says I can write equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. And then our directions say write an equation of that line that passes through the given point and is perpendicular to the given line. So it didn't say, but we need to get it into the form y equals mx plus b, so that if we can graph, we can. So if we're able to graph, if there's a graph given, we can graph it. First equation is already in this slope-intercept form, so our slope is 4/3, and our y-intercept is 6. So in our new line, remember these are perpendicular to each other. A symbol, remember, means perpendicular. Instead of a positive slope, we want a negative slope. Instead of 4/3, we want the reciprocal, which is 3/4. So our new slope that we're going to use is -3/4. And then we have our point right here, x and y, x1 and y1. So we're going to use our point slope form, y minus y1 equal to m, and then x minus x1, and plug in what we know. We're using point slope form because we have a point and a slope. So we have y minus y1, which is a -1. Those two negatives make a positive, equal to our slope, which is -3/4, this slope right here. And then in parentheses, x minus x1, and x1 is a -4. Those two negatives again make a positive. So we need to get y by itself so we can graph it. So let's distribute. Multiply the -3/4 times x, which is just -3/4 x. -3/4 times 4. This is really 4/1 if we make them both fractions. So this is 3 times 4 is 12, and it's negative. 4 times 1 is 4. So 12 divided by 4 is 3, but it's a negative, so -3. I'm going to erase that just because we might want that space later, right somewhere where you might not need it. And then we want to get rid of the 1, so we're going to subtract 1 on both sides. And we have y equals -3/4 x. And -3 minus 1, they're all negatives. That gives us a -4. So we can graph both of these lines. Right here, this -4 is what goes right there for our b. We're beginning this line at -4. So I'm actually going to graph the top line first. We begin at 6, and our slope is rise 4, run 3. We can't go up 4 and 3 to the right, so the opposite of up and right would be down 4 and 3 to the left. Down 4, 3 to the left. So there's the first line. That was that one. Now our second line, this one here, begins at where we -4, and our slope is -3 and 4 to the right, so down 3 and 4 to the right, or the opposite of down and right is up 3, 4 to the left, and we can draw our line through there as well. As you can see, these are perpendicular lines. All right, the next one, we do need to find both equations in the form y equals mx plus b that are perpendicular to each other. So the first one, we just need to solve for y so we can find our slope. So I'm going to move my x's to the other side, subtract 2x. So we have 4y equals -2x plus 12. And then the opposite of multiplying by 4 is dividing by 4. So our equation should be y equals, well, -2/4 is the same as -1/2 x plus 12 divided by 4 is 3. So I know I kind of ran out of room there. But our slope that we wanted to find up here, our slope is -1/2. So that's our slope for that line. So our slope for our perpendicular line, remember we're finding a perpendicular slope. Instead of negative, it's positive. Instead of 1/2, it's 2/1, which is really just a slope of 2. So we're going to use our point, x1 and y1, to write a new equation. We have a point and a slope, so we're going to use point-slope form. Y minus y1 equals m, and then x minus x1. So let's plug in what we know. Y minus y1, which is a negative 1. There's two negatives. The opposite of a negative is a positive. Our m, our slope, is 2. And then x minus x1, which is 8. So we can distribute to get rid of our parentheses. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times negative 8. 8 times 2 is 16. And then we want y by itself, so the opposite of adding 1 is subtracting 1. So we have y equals 2x, and these are all negative, same sign, add and keep, they're all negatives, negative 17. So there is our second line that is perpendicular to our first line. We have our first equation and our second equation. All right, this third question is a little bit different than the first two. It says determine which lines, if any, are parallel or perpendicular. So in order to determine that, we need to find our slopes for each line. So for each one, we need to simply solve for y. This first one, we need to move our x's to the other side, subtract 6x. So we have 2y equals negative 6x plus 5. And then divide everything by 2. So our equation is y equals, well, negative 6 over 2 is negative 3x. 5 divided by 2, it really doesn't matter what this number is. If you want to plug it in your calculator, you can. 2 goes into 5 2 times, there's 1 left, so 1/2 left, 0.5. We don't really care about that number because we were just looking for our slope. Our slope is negative 3. Our next equation is already solved for y. So this one, our slope is 1 over 3. I'm going to make this one a fraction as well so that we have them all in fraction form, negative 3 over 1. And our last equation is also already solved for y. So as a fraction, our slope is negative 3 over 1. So first, do we have any parallel lines? Which ones have the same slope? Well, line C and line A both have a slope of negative 3 over 1. So instead of writing that out in a sentence, we can just write A is parallel to C. The two straight lines that are a little bit tilted means parallel. They could be straight up and down as well. A is parallel to C. And any lines that are perpendicular. Perpendicular meaning one's positive, one's negative, and the fractions flipped. Remember, that's opposite reciprocals. If we look at this first equation, line A, it is opposite of line B because it's positive instead of negative, negative, positive. And instead of 3 over 1, we have 1 over 3. So A and B are perpendicular. We can use this symbol for perpendicular. And since line C was the same as line A, if these two are perpendicular, well then these two also have to be perpendicular because they're opposites, negative, positive, and flipped, positive, 1 over 3 and 3 over 1. So B is also perpendicular to C. All right, on the back we have 2 questions. I would suggest trying these 2 on your own and seeing if you got them right so you can prepare yourself for your homework. First, we need to graph them, but we need to have both of our equations. This first one is already solved for y. It's in the form y equals mx plus b. There's no b there, so we know if there's nothing, it's just 0. And our slope is negative 2/7. If you want to graph that one right away, down 2 and 7 to the right, or up 2, 7 to the left. Oops, this one was only 6. 7 is the edge of our graph. So there's our first line. We're already half done with this equation. Now, if we're looking at perpendicular lines, our slope, our perpendicular slope, instead of negative, it's positive. Instead of 2 over 7, we have 7 over 2. And here's our point, x1, y1. So let's plug this into our point slope form. So we have y minus y1, which is negative 4. 2 negatives there make a positive. Our slope is 7 over 2. and then x minus x1, which is a negative 2. Those two negatives make a positive. So we're going to solve this. We need to distribute first. 7 over 2 times x is just 7 over 2x. 7 over 2 times 2. 2 is 2 over 1. So we have really 14 over 2 if we multiply straight across, which is 7. They're all positive, so it's positive. And so we have y plus 4 equals 7 over 2x plus 7. And we want y by itself, so subtract 4. Opposite of adding 4. We have y equals 7 over 2x. And 7 minus 4 is 3. So our second equation, b is 3. We're beginning at 3 on our y-axis. 1, 2, 3. And our slope is 7 over 2. We cannot go up and right, so the opposite of up and right is down 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 2 to the left. And as you can see, those lines are perpendicular. Slopes are opposite reciprocals. Last question. Since we only really want to find line B in the form y equals mx plus b, we only need to find our slope from this equation. And it's in point slope form. Y minus y1 equals your slope, x minus x1. So our slope right here is 1/2. So we can just write that our slope is 1 over 2. So our slope that's perpendicular to that, instead of positive, we'd have a negative slope. Instead of 1 over 2, we'd have 2 over 1. So we have the point x1 and y1. So let's plug everything into our equation, y minus y1, and then slope x minus x1. So we have y minus y1, which is 10, equal to our slope, which is negative 2 over 1, which is negative 2. And then x minus x1, which is 7. So we solve for y. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Be careful with the second part. A negative times a negative makes a positive. 2 times 7 is 14. And last step, opposite of subtracting 10 is adding 10. So our equation is y equals negative 2x plus 24, which is why I did not have you graph this one, because 24 would not fit on our graph. So here is the line that is perpendicular to the original line that they gave us. Your homework is just like this. If you have any questions, please let me know.